Hello everyone, I am Surbhi Mishra and today I have came up with a new topic in business communication and that is interviews and group discussions. So today we'll be talking about today in today's session we'll be talking about interviews and group discussions. Firstly, we'll be talking about what are interviews, what are the different types of interviews, what tips should be followed, how to give a job interview, or what are the strategies to give an effective interview, right? So, in the beginning of this session, we'll be discussing about the interviews first, and then later on, we'll be discussing about group discussions. So, moving towards the introduction of an interview, let's start. An interview. An interview is a structured conversation where an interview is basically a conversation. It is a more of a formal and a structured format where one person is the interviewer who asks the question to the other person who is the interviewee. So uh, there is a we can say in simple words it is a conversation between the two people. One is the interviewer and the other one is the interviewee is the person who gives the answer, right? For example, if you are going for a job interview, you will be an interviewee. You will be giving an answers to the questions asked by the interviewer, right? The company where you are going in, the people who is going to take your interview will be termed as interviewer, right? So interviews are conducted for various purposes such as job selection, research, media reporting, or investigations. So interviews basically we can say are conducted for various purposes. It can be a job selection, it can be research, it can be about media reporting. For example, somebody is being called up for the media coverage, right? Or for investigation purpose. So when we go through the definition of the interview, let's see what is mentioned over there in the definition. So an interview is a formal or informal interaction between an interviewer and an interviewee, which is aimed at eliciting information through a series of questions. The format can vary widely, including face to face interview, over the phone interview, or via video conferencing, or we can say in panel interview, right? So, what we can say is interviews basically it can be formal also, it can be informal also. When we are talking about some media coverage or some media reporting, so at many point of times it becomes an informal. But when we talk about any job interview, we talk about any investigation, any research, then interview becomes the formal structured way, right? So there are many types of interviews. We'll be discussing it one by one. So first we'll be going to discuss what are the key elements of an interview. So, coming to the very first aspect is preparation. Why, like both the interviewer and interview have to prepare themselves for an interview. Now, the question arises why the interviewer will prepare. The interviewer will prepare so that he may ask questions, must outline the topic he is going to cover, which topics question is going to ask. This on this part, the interviewer also prepares herself or himself to conduct an interview, right? Now, on the part of interviewee, the person who is going to give an interview will must prepare the resume, research about the company, what the company is all about, what is the job profile all about, what are the job specification, what is the job roles and duties, is the eligibility criteria matching to that particular profile, and what are the tasks and roles which is assigned over there. Will he be able to answer those questions? So he has to prepare the answers accordingly, right? Next comes the next element, which is very important, is questioning. The interviewer asks a series of questions designated to gather information, right? So what does an interviewer here do? The interviewer asks a series of questions designated to gather information relevant to the purpose of an interview, or questions can be open ended, it can be closed ended, it can be situational or behavioral. So it totally depends on the interviewer what sort of questions he's going to put in front of the person who is giving an interview, right? So we'll further see what are the other elements. The other important aspect is listening. Effective listening, effective interviewing requires active listening. So, on the part of the interviewer, it is mentioned that the person who is taking interview has to must possess active listening quality. They have to possess the active listening skills to understand the responses of interviewee fully and to ask follow-up questions. So he has to understand what interviewee is saying. For understanding that, the interviewer must be an active listener. He must listen to the interview properly, and then and only he will able to ask the follow-up questions, right? The next comes the evaluation. Now, the interviewer assesses the responses to determine if the interviewee meets the criteria for the role or the purpose of the interview or not. Now, the after the preparation, questioning, listening, the next key element comes is of evaluation. So, on the part of interviewer, he or she assesses the responses, that whether the responses meet the recruitment criteria, the hiring criteria for the purpose of the interview or not. If the criteria gets matched or the criteria is fulfilled, then that person is hired for the particular profile he has applied for, right? Other thing is conclusion. The interviewee concludes with the interviewer summarizing the next steps and often allowing the interviews to ask any final questions, right? So here, in conclusion, what happens is the interviewer gives a chance to the interviewee or to the person who is giving the interview, that whether is there any query from your end or do you want to ask something from me. So such type of thing is being asked to the interview at the last of the formal conversation, right? So these were the key components of an interview. Let's see what else we can study in this. So now we'll be studying the different types of interview. So the different types of interview are structured interview, unstructured interview, semi-structured interviews, behavioral interviews, technical interviews, case interviews, panel interviews, group interviews, telephonic interviews, video conferencing interviews, stress interviews, competency based interviews, sequential interviews, and the very mandatory is the exit interviews. So, these are the different types of interviews. We will be discussing it one by one. So, let's start with the very first type of interview, which is structured interview. So, when we talk about structured interview, so it is clearly understandable that there is a predetermined set of questions. As it is in a structured format, it is already prepared like in a proper manner. It has been planned, and then it has been like the questions have been already predetermined. It has already a structured format. So it will be asked, the questions will be asked in the same order to all the candidates, right? There will be no changes. So it will be followed throughout all the candidates applied for the same profile, right? Next is the purpose. In structured interview, the purpose is to ensure consistency and fairness, right? So what happens is the purpose of the structured interview is we ensure the consistency and fairness. Next is the large organizations, the academic researchers used such type of structured interviews. The questions are pre-planned, or we can say predetermined, and identical for all candidates. So there is no changes in the questions, as there is a first round of interview. In the first round of interview, we can say the screening round, the question is common for all the candidates. Next is the advantages. The advantages of a structured interview is that these interviews are highly reliable and valid as compared to other methods. Structured interviews are much easier, right? The disadvantage can be that it can be inflexible. It is not flexible at all. It has a very rigid format and might not capture full candidates potential. Why? Because it has a very structured format, and it has to that has to be followed throughout for all the candidates, and it is predetermined, and so we can say that this there is no changes can be made to the format. So this is the very we can say this is the only demerit of this, and the this due to this demerit, that due to inflexibility or due to rigidness, the potential of candidate cannot be captured totally. So examples of such interviews can be job fairs, standardized hiring processes in large organizations. Now we'll be moving towards the next type of the interview, which is unstructured. So now, as we have discussed, structured, unstructured is the opposite of the structured interview, right? When we talk about unstructured, that means it has no set pattern or no fixed set of questions. The conversation flows more naturally, right? The purpose allows, here the purpose is allows a more in-depth exploration of the candidate's potential and experience and personality. So it is very used in creative industries, in startups. So it is very common. Now the question, as it is mentioned, there is no fixed pattern. So it depends on the flow of the conversation. The questions arises naturally during the conversation as well. Why? Because there is no set pattern. And the advantage is it's very flexible and can be explored unexpected areas of interest. Sometimes, as it is done using conversation, and when conversation flows naturally, some hidden talent, some unexpected area of interest might get into the conversation. So the disadvantage of this is it is not very much reliable. The reliability is a bit low as compared to structured interview, and is harder to compare candidates. Why? Because most of the time when few people are very much comfortable in the conversation as compared to structured format. So here everybody is at ease when they are interviewing in this format. So at times it's very important to compare the candidates on these parameters. Next comes the example of unstructured interview. So we can consider creative industries like advertising, journalism, media, mass communication. So in these sort of industries, moreover, unstructured interviews are used. Now, coming to the next category, the next type of interview is semi-structured interview. So when we talk about semi-structured interview, it defines the element of both structured and unstructured. So it is a combination of a structured interview and unstructured interview, right? It has a framework of questions, but allows for deviations, right? Like in structured interview, what happened was, well, the pattern of question is fixed and we cannot deviate from it, right? We have to follow the set pattern. But in this semi-structured, their deviation is allowed. We might do some slight changes, right? The purpose is it balances consistency with flexibility, common in most professional settings, and the mix of fixed questions and opportunities for free flowing conversation is being done. The advantage of such type of interviews is that the balance of consistency is over there. It is flexible and more data can be captured from such type of interviews, and it is flexible also. It is the combination of structured and unstructured. So we can have a few data from the structured format and a few data from the very natural conversations, right? So the example can be most modern corporate interviews. Nowadays, semi-structured interviews are being in the trend. So the unstructured form of interview helps the interviewer to get more insight about the candidate's potential. Moving towards the next category of the interviews, behavioral interviews. When we talk about behavioral interviews, it focuses on how the candidate has handled situations in the past, right? It is totally based on the interviewee behavior, like how the particular candidate, how the particular candidate has dealt in with a particular situation. So the purpose here is to predict the future behavior based on past actions. The common in is various industry, especially those emphasizing on teamwork and problem solving. The question here are basically, as it is mentioned, behavioral interview. The questions are based on past behaviors. Example, tell me about a time where you represented leadership skills, or tell me something about you when you work under pressure or in this particular situation. So basically, they were asked about the past behaviors, right? So advantage here is predicts the future behavior, focuses on real life experiences. Disadvantage, candidate may prepare rehearsed answer and might not capture potential. At yes, it is a very mandatory to understand whether the candidate has rehearsed the answer, or he has created himself, or he might have experienced such things in the past behavior. So to identify that, it is very we can say it is not very much convenient, and the interviewer may not rely on these answers. So and the potential of the candidate may not be captured properly, right? Next example can be included in this, the customer service roles, like customer and service roles. When we talk about BPOs or the food service industry or the banking, education, any industry, so we can have the impact of behavioral um, situations which he has handled. So managerial positions can be example of this. To manage a team, to how to be a team leader, how he has managed the team, how he was behaving with his team members, and all this may include in behavioral interview, right? Moving to the next category is technical interview. So when we talk about technical interview, we find that it assess the technical knowledge of a candidate, the technical skills and technical knowledge of a candidate. The purpose here is to determine the technical proficiency and problem solving skills. So why technical interview is being conducted? To check the potential of the candidates, whether he has a very sound knowledge about the technical skills and technical knowledge or not. So it also determines the proficiency level of that particular candidate, and also try to evaluate the problem solving abilities. So it is common in information technology, engineering, and technical roles, right? So questions here which are asked are basically problem solving tasks. technical tasks, and coding challenges, right? So we can say that technical interview is conducted for people who used to have technical skills and knowledge. So it is common in IT, engineering, and technical roles. The questions are related to problem solving, the technical questions, and the coding challenges. Next is advantages of technical interviews. When we talk about advantages of technical interviews, it includes that it assesses our technical skills directly and practical knowledge is being also evaluated. So the disadvantage of this can be it can be stressful, may not assess soft skill. As we are talking only about technical skills, we are keeping into consideration the technical skills. The soft skills may not be uh, focused more, right? So it can be a disadvantage over here. And as it is totally about technicalities and technical knowledge, so it can be stressful for an individual as well, right? Next, here we can take the example of software development roles, engineering positions, right? Where the technical knowledge is required. Next category of interview comes over here is, let's see, the next category is the case interviews. In this type of interviews, the candidate present a business problem, or they used to identify a business problem and they give a solution to it. So what here happens is the case interviews presents the candidate with a business problem to solve. So here a business problem is given and the candidate is asked to identify it and to give a solution to it, right? So the purpose here is to evaluate the problem and analytical skills of an individual to see how the person is able to solve the particular problem, how is able to tackle with it. So the common thing which these type of interview are common in consulting firms and finance. We can say finance sector, or we can say the financial firms. So the question arises over here: presents a business financial statement or a business problem or a financial scenario, and candidate is asked to provide a solution to it. So again, this is used to evaluate the technical analytical thinking. The advantages of this is that this type of interview assess the analytical skills, the problem solving skills, and in real world context. Why? Because the real business situations are given to the candidates and they have to provide the solution to it. So in this particular interviews, the candidates ability to assess, to solve, to analyze something is being evaluated. The disadvantage can be it can require a strong preparation and can be intimidating. So at point of time, people is a candidate is not ready or not very much well prepared, and it as it requires a strong preparation or strong knowledge. So it can unhurt the potential of a candidate as well. So, the example of such interviews can be management consulting or strategic planning roles, right? For the higher profiles. So, moving towards the next category is of panel interviews. When we talk about panel interviews here, we can say are conducted by a group of individuals where a group of interviewers are there and a candidate has to address each of the member. He has to maintain the eye contact with each member of the panel. So the purpose allows the perspective of a candidate, what multiple perspective of a candidate is, right? So these types of interviews are common in academia, in the government undertakings, and in large corporations. So the questions can be like multiple interviewers are asking questions. So asking questions in turn, maybe there may be questions related to the topic or the domain of the particular interviewee. or it can be related to soft skills, it can be related to psychology, it can be situation-based questions, there may be a stress interview. So as there is a panel of members, so they might ask questions from relevant fields, right? And there are chances of a stress interview, situation-based questions, and soft skill is also being analyzed there. The advantage of such type of interview is they have multiple perspective, they have diverse viewpoints, as there are a number of people who are interviewing a candidate. So they may capture all the perspective of an individual, and at times it can be conflicting. The disadvantages is can be overwhelming as there are a lot of people over there, and the potential for conflicting feedback. There can be the we can say there are chances that the feedback there must be a conflict during the feedback, as every member is assessing that individual on their own perspective. So example can be academic positions, high level executive roles. So for these purpose, the panel interviews are being conducted. Moving towards the next type of interview, group interviews. When we talk about group interviews, we see that multiple candidates are interviewed simultaneously. The purpose is to assess candidates' teamwork and communication skills. The common type of interview, these type of interviews are common in roles requiring collaboration and interaction. The questions are totally based on interaction, tasks, or discussions among multiple candidates. As it is a group interview, so questions are asked which is based on discussions or some team allocated or some group allocated tasks. For the advantage over here is the teamwork is assessed, the communication skills and the leadership are assessed in these types of interviews, and the disadvantage may not suit introverted candidates. Group dynamics can skew results. So, a disadvantage of these types of interview is that if a candidate is a very introvert, then these types of interview may not be suitable, right? Because he or she might not be very participative in such sort of interviews and group tasks. As people are from diverse backgrounds with different mindset, may not able to perform better those who are not very much outspoken or not able to work with cooperation and coordination among other peoples, right? So the example can be retail industry, hospitality sector. So these types of sectors usually ask for group interviews. Moving towards the next type of interview is telephonic interviews. Telephone interviews, or we say telephonic interviews, these are the interviews which are conducted over a phone call. The purpose of these type of interview is to just screen out the candidate. We have to do the initial screening over the phone call to check the confidence level, the communication skills, and then in there, the screening is done, whether to call in further for the other rounds or to not. So these types of telephonic interview is, I think, common in all the industry, and it is used for the screening process across all the sectors, right? So it is the very early stage of the hiring process. The questions are typically shorter, focused on qualifications, on the experience, on the introduction part. And the advantage is it's cost effective, time efficient, and convenient for initial screenings. We do not have to call each and every member to the physical location and then we have to screen out. We can do it over a call also. So it saves your time, it saves your cost, and also is convenient for the recruiters. So the disadvantage over here is it lacks visual cues. You're not able to see a person, and it's I can say it's very hard or harder to gauge personality. It's very at times become unpredictable to assess somebody's personality or to say or to find an opinion for some candidates personality. So the example of these types of interview can be first round of interview of any industry, of any we can say sector. So basically, these types of interviews are done for remote roles, for the roles like work from homes, or basically it is done in all the these types of interviews conducted in the first phase for all the industry across all segments, right? So these were the different types of interviews. We'll be moving towards the next category.